And our Holy Father will now give the actual catechesis portion of this general audience, a catechesis that is focusing on the healing of the world after or in view of the pandemic that all of us are facing.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buongiorno.
Dear brothers and sisters, good morning. The pandemic has exposed the plight of the poor and the serious inequality that reigns in the world. And the virus, while it does not distinguish between people, has found great inequalities and discrimination in its devastating path, and it has exacerbated them. The response to the pandemic is therefore dual. On the one hand, it is essential to find a cure for this small but terrible virus, which has brought the whole world to its needs. On the other hand, we must also cure a larger virus, that of social injustice, inequality of opportunity, marginalization, and the lack of protection of the weakest. In this dual response for healing, there is a choice that cannot be lacking according to the Gospel. It is the preferential option for the poor. This is not a political option, and neither is it an ideological option or a partisan or party option. It's at the center of the Gospel. The first who chose the poor is Christ. We heard it ourselves from the letter of Paul to the Corinthians that was read at the beginning. He, being rich, made himself poor to enrich us. He made himself one of us. And because of this, the center of the gospel is this option, the center of Christ's proclamation. Christ himself, who is God, emptied himself, making himself similar to men, and he chose not a life of privilege, but he chose the condition of a servant. He emptied himself, making himself a servant. He was born into a humble family and worked as a craftsman. At the beginning of his preaching, he proclaimed that the poor are blessed in the kingdom of God. He stayed in the midst of the sick, the poor, and the excluded, showing them God's merciful love. And many times he was judged as impure because he would go among the sick and the leprous, and that would make people impure according to the mentality of the law of that time. But he risked everything in order to be near to the poor. Therefore, Jesus' followers are recognized by their closeness to the poor, the least, the sick and the imprisoned, the excluded and the forgotten, those without food and clothing. We can read the famous protocol on which all of us will be judged. We're all going to be judged in Matthew chapter 25. This is a key criterion of Christian authenticity. Some mistakenly think that this preferential love for the poor is a task for the few, but in reality, it is the mission of the Church as a whole. As St. John Paul II said, each individual Christian in every community is called to be an instrument of God for the liberation and promotion of the poor. Faith, hope, and love necessarily push us towards this preference for the most in need, which goes beyond the necessary assistance. Indeed, it implies walking together, allowing ourselves to be evangelized by them, who, knowing the suffering of Christ well, we allow ourselves to be infected by their experience of salvation, their wisdom and creativity. Sharing with the poor means mutual enrichment. And if there are unhealthy social structures that prevent them from dreaming of the future, we must work together to heal, to change these structures. Christ's love guides us, Christ, who loved us to the extreme and reaches the boundaries, the margins, the existential frontiers. To bring the peripheries to the center means focusing our life on Christ, who made himself poor for us, to enrich us by his poverty. We've heard that. We're all worried about the social consequences of the pandemic, all of us. Many people want to return to normality and resume economic activities. Certainly, but this normality should not include social injustices and the degradation of the environment. The pandemic is a crisis. And from a crisis, we're not the same afterward. We're either better or we're worse after a crisis. We want to be better after this crisis. And in order to improve injustices and the degradation of the environment, today we have an opportunity to build something different. For example, we can nourish an economy of the integral development of the poor and not of assisting others. I don't want to downgrade works of assistance. And the church in Italy have a lot of structures that do good, but we need to go beyond that and heal structures that make that assistance necessary. An economy that does not resort to remedies that are in fact poison for society, such as profits that are not linked to the creation of dignified jobs. This type of profit is disassociated from the true economy, that which should bring benefit to the common people, and that in addition is at times indifferent to the damage inflicted on our common home. The preferential option for the poor, this ethical social need that comes from God's love, inspires us to conceive of and design an economy where people, and especially the poorest, are at the center. And it also encourages us to plan for the healing of the virus by prioritizing those who are most in need. How sad it would be if priority for the COVID-19 vaccine were to be given to the richest, that it might become the property of this or that nation instead of being universal and for everybody. What a scandal it would be if all the economic assistance we are observing, most of it with public money, were to focus on rescuing industries that do not contribute to the inclusion of the excluded, the promotion of the least, the common good, or the care of creation. These are criteria for choosing which industries should be helped. Those who contribute to the inclusion of the excluded, the promotion of the least, the common good, and the care of creation. 4 criteria. If the virus were to intensify again in a world that is unjust to the poor and vulnerable, then we must change this world. Following the example of Jesus, the doctor of integrated divine love, that is, a physical, social, and spiritual healing, like the healings that Jesus used to do, we must act now to heal the epidemics caused by small invisible viruses, and to heal those caused by the serious and visible social injustices. I propose that this be done starting from the love of God, placing the peripheries at the center, and those who are least in first place. Let's not forget the protocol on which we will be judged, found in Matthew chapter 25. Let's put that in practice as we pick things up again after the pandemic. Starting from this love, this concrete love, as that gospel says, anchored in hope and founded in faith, a healthier world will be possible. Otherwise, we will be worse after the crisis. May the Lord help us so that we might be better afterward, responding to the necessities of today's world. Thank you.